top-level peace talks between U.S. and Iran in Islamabad have failed, with U.S. Vice President JD Vance announcing that they are heading back to the U.S. without any agreement. The talks, which were extended well beyond original schedule, went on for 21 hours before turning inconclusive. Let's listen to some bites from what has JD Vance said.
We have been at it now for 21 hours, and we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms.
The development has also been confirmed by Iranian state media, which said that Iran-U.S. negotiations ended without an agreement. It further suggested that America's excessive demands prevented a common framework and agreement. Over the past 24 hours, discussions were held on topics including Strait of Hormuz, nuclear issue, war reparations, lifting sanctions, complete end of war against Iran. Iranian state media said that Iran repeatedly presented new initiatives and tried to invite the American side to be realistic. However, a non-realistic U.S. prevented the achievements of a common framework at each round. It further added that despite Pakistan's intervention early this morning, which suggested another round of talks and exchange of texts, ended without a result due to the same American spirit, the state media added that no plan has been announced yet for the time, place, and next round of negotiations. And just minutes before the briefing by U.S. Vice President, Iran's foreign ministry had said that the success of the diplomatic process depended on the other side's seriousness and good faith, urging them to refrain from maximalist and unlawful demands and accept Iran's rights. And well, to discuss more on the latest developments in the region, we were earlier joined by Giorgio Cafiero from Washington, D.C., who is a professor at Georgetown University. Here is what he had to say on the developments.
You know, there definitely was potential for these talks to kind of fall apart immediately. So the fact that they went on for this many hours really speaks to, to get to your question, I think that really speaks to a desire on both the American and the Iranian side to participate in these talks, believing that there was something to gain from staying in Islamabad that many hours and engaging in this dialogue. I think this is the first time there has been so much direct talk between American and Iranian officials since over a decade ago. So it certainly was a historic moment. Obviously, though, the demands of the two sides are so far apart. The red lines, terms set forth by Washington and Tehran, very difficult to bridge. So I think only the most optimistic analysts were expecting a breakthrough today. It was a very difficult environment. But again, to get to your point, though, I think clearly there was an interest on both the parts of both the American and the Iranian delegations in having these talks and going through many different topics that were on the agenda. Well, certainly there's a possibility. At the same time, let's keep in mind that the ceasefire is very fragile and the situation is very delicate. So the ceasefire also could collapse at any moment, but it also could last throughout this whole duration of 2 weeks. It could possibly be extended. Even with Vance departing from Pakistan, there definitely is going to be opportunities for the U.S. and Iran to have additional rounds of talks before this 2-week span is over. We'll have to see. But like I said, we also need to consider the possibility of the ceasefire itself completely collapsing. It's a very, very fragile truce. Maybe better to call it a pause rather than a truce.